Welcome back, as we are probably coming upon what will be the final video recording of the night. There's about 19 minutes of safe video recording time left before I must cut it off for the night out of courtesy to others in my neighborhood. The last video we went over dealt with the number 5, its ties to animals. The how animals different dwelling places tie to humans' different dwelling places, and what was meant by "in the image of God created he them," and how that turned out to be not tied to the physical creation of humans, but rather to the mind. The mind was created based on the mind of God, and so it was after the rebirth, after the soul was reborn in God, and therefore not every human is created in the image of God that walks upon the face of the earth. Only those whose minds are made like unto God. That's those who are reborn into the spiritual side of God rather than according to what man says and believes. We're going to continue now with the close of 71, which we were explaining. I'm going to go back and reread 71 from the beginning so that we're not rejoining that thought in progress. And that will pick up in the next paragraph and go on. So let's begin. And perceiving in that the original models and ideas of those things intelligible by the external senses, which it saw here full of surpassing beauty, it becomes seized with a sort of sober intoxication, like the zealots engaged in the Corybantian festivals, and yields to enthusiasm, becoming filled with another desire, and a more excellent longing, by which it is conducted onwards to the very summit of such things as are perceptible only to the intellect, till it appears to be reaching the great King himself. And while it is eagerly longing to behold him pure and unmingled, rays of divine light are poured forth upon it like a torrent, so as to bewilder the eyes of its intelligence by their splendor. But as it is not every image that resembles its archetypal model, since many are unlike, Moses has shown this by adding to the words "after his image" the expression "in his likeness," to prove that it means an accurate impression, having a clear and evident resemblance in form. And he would not err who should raise the question why Moses attributed the creation of man alone, not to one creator, as he did that of other animals, but to several, for he introduces the Father of the universe using this language: "Let us make man after our image, and in our likeness." Had he then, shall I say, need of any one whatever to help him, he to whom all things are subject, or when he was making the heaven and the earth and the sea, was he in need of no one to cooperate with him? And yet was he unable himself by his own power to make man an animal so short-lived and so exposed to the assaults of fate without the assistance of others? It is plain that the real cause of his so acting is known to God alone, but one which to a reasonable conjecture appears probable and credible, I think I should not conceal, and it is this: of existing things there are some which partake neither of virtue nor of vice, as for instance plants and irrational animals, the one because they are destitute of soul and are regulated by a nature void of sense, and the other because they are not endowed with mind of reason. But mind and reason may be looked upon as the abode of virtue and vice, as it is in them that they seem to dwell. Some things again partake of virtue alone, being without any participation in any kind of vice, as for instance the stars, for they are said to be animals, and animals endowed with intelligence, or I might rather say the mind of each of them is wholly and entirely virtuous, and unsusceptible of every kind of evil. Some things, again, are of a mixed nature, like man, who is capable of opposite qualities, of wisdom and folly, of temperance and dissoluteness, of courage and cowardice, of justice and injustice, in short of good and evil, of what is honorable and what is disgraceful, of virtue and vice. Now it was a very appropriate task for God the Father of all to create by himself alone those things which were wholly good on account of their kindred with himself. And it was not inconsistent with his dignity to create those which were indifferent, since they too are devoid of evil, which is hateful to him. To create the beings of a mixed nature was partly consistent and partly inconsistent with his dignity. Consistent by reason of the more excellent idea which is mingled in them, inconsistent because of the opposite and worse one. It is on this account that Moses says, at the creation of man alone, that God said, "Let us make man," which expression shows an assumption of other beings to himself as assistants, in order that God, the governor of all things, might have all the blameless intentions and actions of man, when he does right, attributed to him, and that his other assistants might bear the imputation of his contrary actions. For it was fitting that the father should in the eyes of his children be free from all imputation of evil, and vice and energy in accordance with vice are evil. And very beautifully, after he had called the whole race man, did he distinguish between the sexes, saying that they were created male and female, although all the individuals of the race had not yet assumed their distinctive form, since the extreme species are contained in the genus, and are beheld as in a mirror by those who are able to discern acutely. And someone may inquire the cause why it was that man was the last work in the creation of the world. For the Creator and Father created him after everything else, as the sacred Scriptures inform us. Accordingly, they who have gone most deeply into the laws, and who to the best of their power have investigated everything that is contained in them with all diligence, say that God, when he had given to man to partake of kindred with himself, grudged him neither reason, which is the most excellent of all gifts, nor anything else that is good, but before his creation provided for him everything in the world. As for the animal most resembling himself and dearest to him, being desirous that when he was born he should be in want of nothing requisite for living, and for living well. The first of which objects is provided for by the abundance of supplies which are furnished to him for his enjoyment, and the other by his power of contemplation of the heavenly bodies, by which the mind is smitten so as to conceive a love and desire for knowledge on those subjects. Owing to which desire, philosophy has sprung up, by which man, though mortal, is made immortal. As, then, those who make a feast do not invite their guests to the entertainment before they have provided everything for festivity, and as those who celebrate gymnastic or dramatic contests, before they assemble the spectators, provide themselves with an abundance of competitors and spectacles and sweet sounds, with which to fill the theatres and the stadia. So in the same manner did the ruler of all, as a man proposing games or giving a banquet, and being about to invite others to feast and to behold the spectacle, first provide everything for every kind of entertainment, in order that when man came into the world he might at once find a feast ready for him, and a most holy theatre, the one abounding with everything which the earth, or the rivers, or the sea, or air brings forth for use and enjoyment, and the other being full of every description of light, which has either its essence or its qualities admirable, and its motions and revolutions worthy of notice, being arranged in perfect order, both as to the proportions of its numbers and the harmony of its periods. And a man would not be far wrong who would say that in all these things there might be discovered that archetypal and real model music, the images of which the subsequent generations of mankind engraved in their own souls, and in this way handed down the art which is the most necessary and the most advantageous to human life. This is the first reason on account of which it seems that man was created after all other animals. And there is another not altogether unreasonable, which I must mention. At the moment of his first birth, man found all the requisites for life ready prepared for him, that he might teach them to those who should come afterwards. Nature all but crying out with a distinct voice that men, imitating the author of their being, should pass their lives without labor and without trouble, living in the most ungrudging abundance and plenty. And this would be the case if there were neither irrational pleasures to obtain mastery over the soul, raising up a wall of gluttony and lasciviousness, nor desires of glory or power or riches to assume dominion over life, nor pains to contract and warp the intellect, nor that evil counselor, fear, to restrain the natural inclinations toward virtuous actions, nor folly and cowardice and injustice, and the incalculable multitude of other evils to attack them. But now that all the evils which I have now been mentioning are vigorous, and that men abandon themselves without restraint to their passions, and to those unbridled and guilty inclinations, which it is impious even to mention, justice encounters them as a suitable chastiser of wicked habits, and therefore as a punishment for wrongdoers. The necessaries of life have been made difficult of acquisition, for men plowing up the plains with difficulty, and bringing streams from rivers, and fountains by channels, and sowing and planting, and submitting indefatigably day and night to the labor of cultivating the ground, provide themselves every year with what is necessary, even that at times being attended with pain, and not very sufficient in quantity, from being injured by many causes, for either a fall of incessant rain has carried away the crops, or the weight of hail which has fallen upon them has crushed them altogether, or snow has chilled them, or the violence of the winds has torn them up by the roots. For water and air cause many alterations, tending to destroy the productiveness of the crops. But if the immoderate violence of the passions which were appeased by temperance, and the inclination to do wrong and depraved ambition were corrected by justice, and in short, if the vices and unhallowed actions done in accordance with them were corrected by the virtues, and the energies in accordance with them, the war of the soul being terminated, which is in good truth the most grievous and heavy of all wars, and peace being established, and founding amid all our faculties a due regard for law, with all tranquillity and mildness, then there would be hope that God, as being a friend to virtue, and a friend to honor, and above all a friend to man, would bestow upon the race of man all kinds of spontaneous blessings from his ready store. For it is evident that it is easier to supply most abundantly the requisite supplies without having recourse to agricultural means, from treasures which already exist, than to bring forth what as yet has no existence. I have now mentioned the second reason. There is also a third, which is as follows. God, intending to adapt the beginning and the end of all created things together, as being all necessary and dear to one another, made heaven the beginning and man the end, the one being the most perfect of incorruptible things among those things which are perceptible by the external senses, and the other, the best of all earth-born and perishable productions, a short-lived heaven, if one were to speak the truth, bearing within himself many star-like natures, by means of certain arts and sciences, and illustrious speculations, according to every kind of virtue. For since the corruptible and the incorruptible are by nature opposite, he has allotted the best thing of each species to the beginning and to the end, heaven, as I before said, to the beginning, and man to the end. And besides all this, another is also mentioned among the necessary causes. It was necessary that man should be the last of all created beings, in order that being so, and appeasing suddenly, he might strike terror into the other animals. For it was fitting that they, as soon as they first saw him, should admire and worship him as their natural ruler and master, on which account they all, as soon as they saw him, became tame before him, even those who by nature were most savage, becoming at once most manageable at the first sight of him, displaying their unbridled ferocity to one another, and being tamed to man alone. For which reason the Father who made him to be being dominant over them by nature, not merely in fact, but also by express verbal appointment, established him as the king of all the animals beneath the moon, whether terrestrial or aquatic, or such as traverse the air. For every mortal thing which lives in the three elements, land, water, or air, did he put in subjection to him, excepting only the beings that are in heaven, as creatures who have a more divine portion. And what is apparent to our eyes is the most evident proof of this. For at times innumerable herds of beasts are led about by one man, not armed, nor wearing iron, nor any defensive weapon, but clad only in a skin for a garment, and carrying a staff for the purpose of making signs, and to lean upon also in his journeys if he become weary. And so the shepherd, and the goat herd, and the cow herd lead numerous flocks of sheep, and goats, and herds of oxen, men neither vigorous nor active in their bodies, so as to strike those who behold them with admiration because of their fine appearance. And all the might and power of such numerous and well-armed beasts, for they have means of self-defense given them by nature, yet dread them as slaves do their master, and do all that is commanded them. Bulls are yoked to the plow to till the ground, and cutting deep furrows all day, sometimes even for a long space of time together, while some farmer is managing them. And rams, being weighed down with heavy fleeces of wool in the spring season, at the command of the shepherd, stand quietly, and lying down without resistance, permit their wool to be shorn off, being accustomed naturally, like cities, to yield a yearly tribute to their sovereign. And moreover, that most spirited of animals, the horse, is easily guided after he has been bridled, in order that he may not become frisky and shake off the rein, and he hollows his back in an admirable manner to receive his rider, and to afford him a good seat. And then bearing him aloft, he gallops at a rapid pace, being eager to arrive at and carry him to the place to which he is urging him. And the rider, without any toil, but in the most perfect quiet, makes a rapid journey, by using the body and feet of another animal. And any one who was inclined to dwell upon this subject might bring forward a great many other instances to prove that there is no animal in the enjoyment of perfect liberty, and exempt from the dominion of man. But what has been already said is sufficient by way of example. We ought, however, not to be ignorant of this also, that it is no proof because man was the last created animal that he is the lowest in rank. And charioteers and pilots are witnesses of this. For the charioteers sit behind their beasts of burden, and are placed at their backs. And yet when they have the reins in their hands, they guide them wherever they choose. And at one time they urge them on to a swift pace, and at another time they hold them back, if they are going on at a speed greater than is desirable. And pilots again, sitting in the hindmost part of the ship, that is the stern, are, as one may say, the most important of all the people in the ship, inasmuch as they have the safety of the ship and of all those who are in it in their hands. And so the Creator has made man to be, as it were, a charioteer and pilot over all other animals, in order that he may hold the reins and direct the course of everything upon earth, having the superintendence of all animals and plants as a sort of viceroy of the principal and mighty king. To be continued tomorrow in the next video.